So far in this series, we've covered games for handheld systems, primarily the Game Boy Advance. But for this episode though, let's cover a different system. Let's step back to the days of the Sega Genesis in the mid-90s. This was during the height of the Mega Man franchise, with the 6th game releasing on the NES in 1994, and the start of the Mega Man X series in 1993. Mega Man was doing incredibly well at the time. It was exclusive to Nintendo systems.
In 1993, Capcom, seeing the sales of the Sega Genesis/Mega Drive, decided to come to the old Sega to become a third-party licensee. This allowed games like Street Fighter 2 to make its way to the platform. This also allowed the release of Mega Man: The Wily Wars for the Sega Genesis, and another side game, Mega Man for the Game Gear.
Mega Man: The Wily Wars is a compilation of the first 3 Mega Man games remade in 16-bit for the Sega Genesis. The game was actually never released here on cartridge in North America. It was exclusive to Sega's paid online subscription service for games, Sega Channel. However, it was released physically in Europe and Japan. However, it was re-released on the Sega Genesis Mini, and recently the new official Sega Genesis cartridge released by Retrobit.
Now that we got some information about Mega Man: The Wily Wars out of the way, it's time to pop this non-existent sucker in and relive the first 3 battles with Dr. Wily.
Dr. Wily. Despite this technically being a compilation, Wily Wars actually has a plot going on. Ashamed by his past defeats, Dr. Wily goes back in time to change the past to defeat Mega Man, all culminating into one final showdown at the brand new side game, Wiley Tower. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes of this game, the games. I'm going to tackle this video a bit differently. I'm first going to look at the original game, then its Sega Genesis counterpart. So let's dive right in with the first Mega Man. Rockman, or Mega Man known in the West, was originally released for the Famicom and Nintendo Entertainment System in 1987. Created by mainly Akira Kitamura and Keiji Inafune, it focused on a blue dude and his quest to kill 6 of his brothers, Cutman, Bombman, Electman, Gutsman, Fireman, and Iceman, and defeat the evil Dr. Wily, only to let him go and spawn 11 more sequels: the X Series, Zero Series, CX Series, Battle Network Series, Star Force Series, Legend Series, and many other side games, comics, cartoons, and whatever this is. The series became oversaturated in the late 90s and early 2000s, took a break until the early 2010s with Mega Man 9 and 10, took another dirt nap with many cancelled games, and is currently back with compilations of merchandise. Recap done. Now time to talk about Mega Man 1 itself. It's a simple run and gun game. Jump and shoot and get to the end. However, Mega Man stands apart from other platformers at the time by allowing the player to choose any stage they want to start at all. However, the problem with this system is that this goes for a lot of the games. Some bosses are just not as balanced as others for first picks. For example, Bombman and Cutman are relatively easy, while Electman and Fireman make you want to feel like Shintae ill. So for most games in this series, there ends up being a good weakness order you just follow every time you play, limiting the sense of freedom. Once you defeat a Robot Master, you gain their special weapon, which can be used as either a weakness for another Robot Master, or just using the stage instead of the old reliable Lemon Shooter. This was always one of my favorite parts of the Mega Man franchise, seeing the weapon I'm gonna get, just using it in the stages to either be zipping through, destroying everything in my path, or be just as disappointed as a homophobic father when their kid is coming out of the closet.
Yep, it's a problem. Get your Mega Man E-Tank energy drink ready, because this game wasn't exactly graceful.
Mega Man really suffers from something we like to call first game syndrome. This is a case where the first games in a series have quite a bit of flaws that later on in other games would be ironed out and improved upon. A good example of this is the original Legend of Zelda. Revolutionary game and incredibly open and expansive for the time. However, today, its flaws are more noticeable, and you can just get the same experience in better and future entries, such as Breath of the Wild and Link Between Worlds. Mega Man 1 has quite a few cases of unfair enemy placement that can just fuck you over, mandatory weapons to complete the game, where if you didn't get the Magna Beam in Electman stage, you can't advance to Wily Stage 1, overpowered weapons such as the Elect Beam that are so powerful because of its damage output and how big its hitbox is, stages with god-awful and unfair sections like the RNG floating platforms in Iceman stage, the Fire Tubes in Fireman stage, and the mentioned Magna Beam section in Wily Stage 1, and a boss that was too difficult to fight without cheating the game or using a heavy amount of memorization. Cough the Yellow Devil, pause glitch, cough, cough, cough. If you do die from these factors, you can luckily start back at the beginning of the stage, or go back to the stage select to give another boss a try. Speaking of dying, that's something that can happen a lot in this game. There are some sections that will test you and your gaming skill more than any tutorial stage to a modern game journalist. However, you will definitely overcome these obstacles and make your way to the end of the game eventually. It's hard, but fair. Most of the time. There's also something kind of weird in this game that later entries really improve on. Mega Man's control. Rock can jump and shoot fine, though he does have a bit of weight on him that can make platforming feel a bit awkward. Mega Man himself also has a case of the Mario 2 Luigi's where he's pretty slippery to control, which can throw you off and make you more precise jumps. You can get used to it though. The game ends with the boss rush of the 6 Robot Masters, the Copy Robot, a few Dr. Wily's machines, seeing his impressive Gutsman figure collection, and a final boss fight with Wily himself. It's an easy fight that ends with Mega Man just staring at Wily and runs back home.
Why?
All in all, Mega Man 1 is an alright game. It's not a bad experience and a relatively short game, it's only about 45 minutes if you know what you're doing. It's a good early NES game, and that's something I do admire about the NES games. They really pushed it to its limits as time went on, sound and graphics wise. As where Mega Man 1 stands, it laid the groundwork that would be built up by a future game.
If you want to play it, it's in a lot of places like the Mega Man Legacy Collection or the Virtual Console. Now, let's see how it updated in Wily Wars.
To start off, Mega Man The Wily Wars builds off the Famicom versions of these games, so we'll get to those differences when we get to the other games, but for now we're just talking about the Wily Wars in general. First thing I noticed when I started playing is that firing your buster feels off. It feels slower, and that's because unlike the original games where you fired a shot every other frame, Wily Wars chooses to fire a shot every few frames. This is something you can get used to, but it's a little jarring coming from the 8-bit originals. Another thing that is a bit odd to get used to is Mega Man's control. He feels heavier than in the NES games, but that may have to do with another thing that is prevalent with all throughout the Wily Wars, slowdown. It shows up a lot in all 3 games, and while it sometimes can be beneficial, such as in the Yellow Devil fight, it can get pretty annoying sometimes. There's also a glitch where on smaller platforms like the ones on the Magnet Beam or Item 1 platforms in Mega Man 2, where due to Mega Man's slimmer hitbox, he can easily fall off or slip off the edge of them. Bosses also have quite a few differences from the original game. For Mega Man 1, they actually use mugshots now instead of the original sprites from the NES game. Gutsman now tries to aim blocks at you when he throws them instead of just in a straight line. Bomb Man is also pretty different, as now instead of jumping away when you get close to him, he does make an effort to try to get close to you. Cut Man now takes less damage from the Mega Buster, only doing about a third of its original damage output. Elect Man is faster and jumps more than he did before, making the fight a tad bit harder than a Discord mod when an underage girl joins the server. I noticed a difference with the Copy Robot too. In the original he only runs back and forth until you attack, but in the Genesis version he took lessons from Breakman and tries to show off his epic jumping skills. The boss of Wily Stage 3 now requires 8 hits from the Mega Buster instead of 10 from the original. The door in the Yellow Devil fight doesn't close, making it possible to stand on the left and not get hit when the devil himself comes in. The items in Wily Stage 2 are now actually impossible to grab without the use of the Magnet Beam for some reason. These things were already hard enough to reach, and now it's actually impossible. And the last change to note is that the title screen now has music using the title theme from Mega Man 3.
Alright, we're only 1 game down and 2 more games to go.
Mega Man 2 was originally released for the Famicom and NES in 1988. However, it originally wasn't going to be this way. Mega Man 1 was not successful enough to warrant a sequel, though Kira Kitamura wanted to work on one. Capcom came to a compromise that the team can make the game but will work on it on the side of other projects. The team took their time to make this game what it is today, and I honestly applaud them, especially how it was only done in 3 to 4 months. Mega Man 2 was also the first game at the time to take fan submissions for Robot Masters. Though the contest was Japan only, the final robots that made it in were Bubble Man, Heat Man, Metal Man, Flashman, Crash Man, Wood Man, Quick Man, and Air Man. Anyways, after Dr. Wily's defeat in the last game, he assembles 8 more Robot Masters that you have to once again kill and take their weapon to defeat this Einstein-looking motherfucker. So you're back running and gunning, but this time the Blue Bomber has a new set of weapons and 3 new helpful items that create platforms that either go up and down or straight ahead. But the weapon selection in Mega Man 2 has one major flaw, and that's how unbalanced it is. In Mega Man 1, every weapon except for the Mega Arm was useful in some way no matter how small. However, you probably saw this coming, but one weapon rises above the rest, and that one is the Metal Blade. You can fire it in 8 directions, have so much ammo you'll never run out, and it's way more useful than more than half of the other weapons. It's not that they're bad, they just don't really compare. I don't really use many of these unless it's on Robot Masters or the occasional situation. And speaking of Robot Masters, this time instead of 6, there are 8. Again, like the first game, you can choose which one you want to tackle in any order you want, but there is a weakness order that you're most likely going to take, probably involving Metal Man being the first one to go. The stages still have some unfair moments and such, like the ladder section in the Crash Man stage, the disappearing block section in Heat Man stage, and the surprise PPs in Air Man stage. However, the most unforgiving part is the boss of Wily Stage 4. It's simple, but can be very frustrating. All it requires you to do is to simply defeat these turrets on the walls with crash bombs. The frustrating part is if you run out of crash bombs here, you can't defeat the boss, and you have to either die and go grind weapon energy, or game over and retry from the beginning of Wily's castle. Again, this is just bad design, and luckily this kind of situation isn't in future games. But Mega Man 2 really does improve on the first game in a number of aspects. The stages feel, for the most part, better designed than last time. Everything just flows more smoothly, and enemies aren't as dickish as they were in Mega Man 1. And when they are, there are just more ways around it with the better weapon selection this time around. Remember the section in Crash Man stage I just mentioned? Well, a good way around it is using the leaf shield to more easily make your way up. Having trouble with the disappearing blocks in Heat Man stage? Well, just use item 2 and to bypass all of them. Are you angry by the insta-kill beams in Quick Man stage? Well, use Flash Stopper and just stop time until you can make a way around them. However, this does make Mega Man 2 easier than its predecessor by a substantial amount. Really, Mega Man 2 is a good start if you want to get into the franchise, but even in more difficult stages like Quick Man's, you can just fly right through if you're paying attention and good at quick decision making. If you do die, once again you have the option to keep trying the stage you game overed on, or go back to the stage select and pick another Robot Master to tackle. But Mega Man 2 introduces a series staple, the password system. The control has also been more refined from the original, and would become the standard for the rest of the NES games. It's tighter than in the original game, Mega Man isn't as slippery anymore, making platforming pretty fun and more accurate. If that wasn't enough, Mega Man 2 introduces energy tanks into the mix. Found throughout the stages, you can hold up to 4 at a time, and using one would automatically refill all your health. Sadly, weapon energy tanks aren't a thing yet until Mega Man 7, but again, you wouldn't really need them except for the stupid turret boss. Energy tanks are also taken away once you get a game over, but because of this, it's balanced in a way, so you don't need them to complete the game. They're more like something to have as a backup or some extra help for newer players. Levels usually follow the same patterns, introducing some kind of gimmick to be used throughout the stage, whether it's conveyor belts in Metal Man stage, the insta-kill lasers in Quick Man stage, or the disappearing blocks in Heat Man stage. Aside from the gimmicks, the stages are pretty basic and simple in design. There are some set pieces I do remember off the top of my head, but that's mainly because they're used throughout the entire stage. They all feel the same structural-wise, and their respective Robot Masters aren't much to write home about either. They're all pretty easy to take out, weakness or not. However, they also have some either annoying invulnerability like Woodman, random attack patterns that can't be dodged like Airman, or just scream like Michael P. and perish. That goes for this whole game. Levels are certainly longer than the first game, but it certainly doesn't feel like that at all. It only takes about maybe over 20 more minutes to complete Mega Man 2 than Mega Man 1. The final stages can be a bit of a hassle if you don't have enough weapon energy, but there are plenty of spots that easily get the energy back and health needed. But there are a few moments in the Wily stages where that just make you scratch your head and question if the designers had someone shit in their cornflakes that morning. Wily Stage 1 has a segment where you have to use item 1 to make a very precise jump that can just be stupid at times. Wily Stage 3 has false floors, which one is above a pit of spikes, and I don't think I need to explain why that's just bad design. The final fights in the Wily stages are piss easy, with the only frustrating one being the one that shall not be named. After defeating it, you enter the second boss rush in the series, a feature you will get tired of after a few games ending the same way. You fight Wily Machine 2, which is again easy peasy lemon booty cheek squeezy, and you get taken to somehow the catacombs of the fortress. After dodging some ammo, which does more damage than when Karen took the kids, Dr. Wily reveals himself to be an alien, but not for long as you have the power of bubbles on your side. Wily bows to you again and again, and Mega Man just walks away without doing anything about it, ending Mega Man 2. Okay, this game isn't bad, it really isn't, but this is by far one of the weaker entries of the series. For every new addition and pro, there's a con that just brings down the experience a little bit. Mega Man 2 is by far the best-selling game in the series, and that may be the reason why it's so praised so much today, as well as the fact that most retro gamers when the internet started to become more prevalent were more nostalgic for this game. Anyone who really had experience with the later games was most likely younger and didn't have as much of a leg to stand on. It was just taken as fact this is the best one, and even now it's still acclaimed. Again, this game isn't bad, far from it. If you like it and it's one of your favorites, there's nothing wrong with that, but in my opinion, it's a very weak game in the series. But it did do a lot right, such as the improved control, introduction of having 8 Robot Masters instead of 6, energy tanks, and especially the presentation. Mega Man 2 graphically really improves on the first game with more detailed backgrounds and just more visually interesting stages. Whether it's the forest of Woodman stage, the turning gears in Metal Man stage, the clouds in Airman stage, or even the factory aesthetic of Heat Man stage. It's all so much better than the mostly blank backgrounds of Mega Man 1 stages. The game also has an opening cutscene explaining the plot and having an opening shot of Mega Man standing on top of a building this time around, better than just cutting right to the title screen of Mega Man 1. And I know I'm beating a dead horse, but I do have to agree the soundtrack is quite amazing and certainly catchy. But all these things just mask a game that's just pretty dull when taking a deeper look at it. If you want to play it, again, it's in Legacy Collection, the Virtual Console, and quite a few other places.
I know it's not exactly gonna fix much, but let's head on over to the Genesis version and see what exactly was fixed.
The first thing you'll immediately notice is that Mega Man 2 does not have a difficulty selection in the Wily Wars. However, that's because it's using the Japanese version as a base and it originally did not have a normal/easier difficulty. So enemies now take double the damage they would in normal mode, but it doesn't matter that much. Just like the first game, boss fights have been altered slightly. Quick Man moves slower than on the NES, and it's just not the slowdown. Flashman jumps whenever you fire a shot rather than just taking damage. Heat Man's flame attack has a higher arc than the original, making it easier to avoid. Wind Man has added height, making it more difficult to avoid his leaf shield attack. The second phase of Wily Machine 2's bouncing shots bounce slightly higher and are fired one at a time rather than up to 3 in the original game. Now for some non-boss differences. When getting a game over in this version, you actually get to keep your energy tanks when you continue, which is a really nice feature. The leaf shield has more ammunition, only using 2 bars of energy rather than 3. And to end off the differences, the crash bomb has a slightly bigger blast radius, which really doesn't make that much of a difference except for the turret boss, because you can actually destroy more than one door that way.
And with that, we're on the last game of the Wily Wars, capping it off with Mega Man 3.
Mega Man 3 was originally released for 1990, again for the Famicom and Nintendo Entertainment System. Development began a little over a year after the release and success of Mega Man 2. However, Akira Kinemura left Capcom during that time, so Keiji Inafune was the main one in charge, which put a lot of stress on him. The original planner for the first 2 games also left, and the new one didn't understand what made Mega Man, so that added more stress onto Inafune, as he was pretty much the only one in charge of the game. After another very stressful 2 months of deadlines and weren't being met, Mega Man 3 was finally put onto market, albeit a little unfinished, but surprisingly was another success, though not as much as Mega Man 2. So yeah, Mega Man 3 went through development hell and was one of Keiji Inafune's least favorite games to work on. But how did the game actually turn out? Well, let's kick things off with the story. After his failures in the first 2 games, Dr. Wily turns good and joins Dr. Light, Mega Man's creator, who also created the first 6 Robot Masters in the first game, to work on a project to create a peacekeeping robot named Gamma. However, a set of mining robots and Top Man go off taking Gamma's power crystals, so once again Mega Man sets off to collect the crystals and save the world again, but this time with his new robot dog, Rush. The story is definitely going into a new direction, but it's still very simple, and you can tell, spoilers, Wily's going to turn out to be behind it the whole time, but I'll give it a pass as this is only the 3rd game in the series and this trope hasn't been worn out yet. We're back running and gunning for the 3rd time, and if you played the other 2 games or have watched this so far, you know what to expect. Mega Man controls just like he did in Mega Man 2, but he does feel a little less slippery than before. So once again, you have a tighter feel, which makes platforming feel a lot better. But this time, the Super Fighting Robot has a new move in his arsenal, and it's the ability to slide. By pressing down and A, you'll do a slide, and this is surprisingly really fun to use, and it makes for interesting level design and enemy choices. Speaking of stages this time around, the Robot Masters we got are a hell of a lot more interesting and not as generic as last time. Top Man, Needle Man, Snake Man, Spark Man, Gemini Man, Magnet Man, Shadow Man, and the obligatory Peenstroke Hard Man. All of their stages are pretty varied and interesting, and not to mention they expand upon the last games with things like design that uses your new ability to slide, and areas that make nearly all weapons useful. But these things come with a few drawbacks. Weapons, while pretty balanced, do have a few weak spots. The Gemini Laser, if it doesn't hit your target, just bounces around for a while. The Needle Cannon is an uninspired weapon, you just shoot a needle. Spark Shot, you just shoot a spark. And the Top Spin just sucks. The Rush Marine is also only used in 1 stage, and after that it's pretty worthless. Oh, yeah, this is Rush's debut. Starting from the beginning, you have Rush Coil, letting you bounce higher to places for things like items or when the stage requires it. Later on, you get the Rush Jet and Rush Marine. Rush Jet is borderline broken in this game. It lets you skip most enemies and obstacles as it's fully controllable. However, Rush Marine is just a submarine only used for 1 stage. Levels still have their fair share of trial and error moments, such as the rising sections in Sparkman stage, the Needles in Needleman stage, the falling trash in Sparkman stage, the disappearing blocks in Magnet Man stage, and most of the Doc Robot stages designed. But for the most part, the gameplay is pretty fair and still stands balanced throughout the adventure. The level design has been improved since Mega Man 2 as well. It's still fair, but does have some moments that make you either question if you're at fault, or the game being unfinished like these cloud platforms in Snake Man stage, the I'm pretty sure undodgeable chunks of debris in Spark Man stage, or the spike fetish someone had with the Doc Robot stages. As mentioned earlier, after defeating the 8 Robot Masters, the Doc Robots show up in harder versions of 4 of the original stages, and they're essentially rematches with the bosses from Mega Man 2, and I hate this. You now have to memorize another weakness order, and this just ends up being padding because there's no reason behind it, and then you just immediately go to the Wily stages. There's little mistakes to be made here. You get one checkpoint after defeating the first Doc Robot in the stage, but before then, it's just back to the start. There was no reason for these guys to be here, and it just brings down the quality of the game and just ends up being padding to make it feel longer. Energy tanks return, and now you can stack 9 of them rather than 4 previously. This makes some sections of the game a little more forgiving, but I do wish there was a better way of getting them though. You still have to find them in stages or get lucky with these item drop boxes. These little boxes, canisters, whatever they are, when shot, drop in a random item. They're pretty uncommon, so hope you get something good from them. Once again, the soundtrack is really good. Every track from the title screen to the end is enjoyable, which goes for the entire series. At worst, it's just forgettable like Hard Man's theme. Ironic, I know. My favorites here being Top Man's theme, Spark Man's theme, Snake Man's theme, the title theme, Shadow Man's theme, and Wily Stage 1. After taking down the Doc Robots, you face the mysterious Breakman, who doesn't like picture frames. He shows up sporadically in stages and loves jumping and shooting. He's very easy and just makes you ask why is he here. Then you just go into the most likely the easiest Wily stages in the entire series. They just hand out health and energy tanks like it's candy. Wily stages this time around are also pretty short with fairly simple bosses. Even Gamma himself is a pushover, top spin or not. And with defeating Gamma, the fortress begins to crumble. Debris falls onto Mega Man and Wily, and Rock falls unconscious. Fortunately though, he is saved by Breakman, which Dr. Light then deduces must be the first robot he created, Proto Man, ending Mega Man 3. All in all, Mega Man 3 isn't the best of this series, but I do see why it's well liked. The introduction of features such as the slide and rush, the story, Proto Man are all good and were handled well. However, the game itself does suffer from a few bad design choices and padded runtime. The stages, while fun to play, each have their own issues, and not to mention how easy some can be with the rush jet being overpowered. But even after all of this, Mega Man 3 is still a fine game. If you want to play it, it's available on the Legacy Collection, eShop, or through other means.
And for the last time, let's switch on over to the 16-bit side and see what changed.
Once again, it's based on the Japanese version for starters, so the title screen is automatically improved, but this also isn't the only change. Mega Man 3 has by far the most differences from the original in the first 2 games. Let's start with the bosses. Just like the previous 2 games, the AI for some of the Robot Masters has been altered. Gemini Man is a little more difficult to avoid after his clone has been destroyed and he no longer pauses after firing the Gemini laser. Magnet Man's pull doesn't render him invincible and gives you free hits anymore. You can't disable his shield by intentionally damaging yourself anymore either. Snake Man moves around slightly differently than how he did in the NES games, but it's not noticeable nor affects the fight itself. Spark Man only takes 1 damage from the needle cannon instead of 2. He can also get stuck on walls sometimes as well. Shadow Man's attacks are now RNG based rather than following a set pattern. You can't slide under his Shadow Blades anymore as well. Doc Robot battles don't hold you in place anymore after defeating one. Doc Robot Quick Man is also now using Quick Man's updated AI from Mega Man 2. Doc Robot Woodman's shield blocks shots after being thrown, but to compensate he stands still for much longer. Doc Robot Bubble Man doesn't fire shots as quickly. Doc Robot Heat Man has been made easier as his attacks reach much farther, making it easier to slide under, kinda like Mega Man 2. Just like with the 16-bit counterpart of Mega Man 1, the Yellow Devil fight has also been made easier with the door not closing. Devil fight's also made easier thanks to the slowdown. Next, how about we go over item differences? A lot of item differences. The magnet missiles behave slightly odder as they just stop and then turn up and down to reach enemies. They also home in on more projectiles, unlike the original. The Hard Knuckle now has a slight delay, making some bosses a little more difficult. The Shadow Blade, Needle Cannon, and Gemini Laser will now remain on screen if it kills enemies in a single hit. Topspin had a bug that was actually fixed in this version. The original, if you hit an enemy with it, it would take 1 point of damage for every frame, pretty much draining all of it. However, now you can actually use it as you are now invulnerable while using it. Rush Marine can only fire 1 shot at a time and will teleport if Mega Man jumps out of the water and onto a platform. Rush Jet can also now go above the screen, but it will disappear if it goes too high. It also can't be flown in a 2-corridor hallway anymore. And that's it for weapons, and now time for stage differences. The Clouds in Snake Man stage don't have any collision issues anymore, which is pretty great. In Wily Stage 1, the platform containing 2 large weapon energy capsules is the same as in the Japanese version. They were removed in the US American versions. And now time for some miscellaneous changes. Mega Man's live counter now caps out at 9 instead of 99. The gray colors on Proto Man's sprite have been now changed to white. Proto Man's shadow sprites at the end of the game have been changed, as now it's just a sprite with a shadowy color palette. even though the actual sprites from the end are in the game's data. Something also weird is that unlike the other Robot Masters, Proto Man did not get an updated look. The Wily Castle match screen music has now been shortened. Dr. Wily's name has also been corrected from Wiley with an E. Dr. Light's Japanese name, Wright, has also been changed in this version.
And like that, we're done with all 3 games. Well, yes, but actually no. You see, there's one more adventure in the Wily Wars that we have to go through, and it's the final battle with Dr. Wily, at least for right now, Wiley Tower.
After completing all 3 games in the Wily Wars, it unlocks the mode Wiley Tower. 4 new levels where you face off against the Genesis unit. Bosses all inspired by Journey to the West. This mode is pretty ahead of its time as it allows you to pick any combination of weapons from the first 3 games. Everything is here for you to use, provided it's out of the 8 choices made by you. Wily Tower is definitely a fun time, but it's really short and not that difficult. Though it really is a fun remix of classic Mega Man that you should give a try if you can get to it.
And with that, I'm done with another game, and this is another episode in the books. So, is the set of remakes good or bad? Well, all in all, I give Mega Man The Wily Wars an 8 out of 10.
Wily Wars does an amazing job remaking the first 3 games in the franchise, and Wily Tower is a really nice addition as well. This game went through a very troubled development, and I applaud the developers for their hard work on it. However, there's really not much of a reason to go back to play these versions over the 8-bit originals. The main culprit here is pretty much the frame drops. It can help rarely, but for the most part it happens way too often for my liking to really have fun with these games as much as I do for the NES versions. It's a shame too, because if it really weren't for that, and if the games were just re-released more, I bet this would be many people's preferred way of playing these games. The save feature is a really nice addition too, and all the improvements I made to these games isn't unnoticed, but it's not enough to make this the best possible version.
But it's not a bad thing either. Wily Wars is still a fine game if you're interested in it, and it's still worth at least one playthrough. And with that said, I'll see you all next time when I sue my dumb fuck therapist for telling me Mr. Bones doesn't exist. But he does exist. I see him in my nightmares every fucking night, and he won't stop singing the same song to me over and over again. It goes a little something like this. 5 Nights at Freddy's.